Have you ever wondered about the origin story of a Pokémon? Like, what the background is behind why we have each individual Pokémon that we do? It's a super fascinating topic, and we've been able to learn about the origin stories for a decent handful of Pokémon so far, which I've covered in the past, and today I've got a brand new batch to cover as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's begin with a Pokémon that basically doesn't have much of anything going for it, which is why these stories are so cool, because they can even make a Pokémon like Octillery sound interesting. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way, but other than looking nothing like its pre-evolution Remoraid, this Pokémon really doesn't have much of anything going for it. That is, until you look at how it came to be in the first place. Both Octillery and its pre-evolution Remoraid are more or less recycled designs, if you can believe it, and where they've been recycled from doesn't have anything to do with Pokemon. Remoraid and Octillery were actually pulled from one of Game Freak's non-Pokemon games, Pulseman, where they existed as the Gunfish and Octbomb enemies. Now, not only do these baddies from Pulseman have the exact same concept as their Pokemon counterparts, the Octbomb in particular even resembles Octillery pretty significantly, making the connection fairly obvious. And ultimately, to know that these Gen 2 Pokemon originate from a whole other game that Game Freak created is pretty cool. Remoraid and Octillery weren't the only Pokemon that originated from Pulseman, however. Two more enemies from these games that distinctly resemble Pokemon are these two. And can you tell on your own who they might have inspired? Well, you might be able to, as they bear a strong resemblance to Xatu and Registeel, respectively. They're not quite as on the nose as, say, Octillery's inspiration, but given that Game Freak created all of these characters, the resemblance between them is unlikely to be a coincidence. With a little bit of tweaking, it's likely that these two were converted into Pokemon as well, which, in my opinion, makes these Pokemon all the more interesting. While some of these are fairly obvious in terms of their connections, others are a little more ambiguous, and the connections are a little more unclear, but are still significant enough to be noteworthy. An example of a Pokemon like this is Fennekin. Fennekin debuted as the Fire-type starter Pokemon in Pokemon X and Y, which began Pokemon's 6th generation. However, it's possible that Fennekin's origins could trace all the way back to Generation 2. As you may know, tons of beta and cut content for Pokemon Gold and Silver has recently leaked over the past few years, including a bunch of cut Pokemon. One of these cut designs is this Fox Pokemon, which even just on the surface does bear some similarity to Fennekin. When you look a little closer though, and particularly at its back sprite, and realize that it has a flame tail, the similarities between these two start to become a little too uncanny, and it begins to seem legitimately possible that Fennekin's origins could come from this scrapped Pokemon that existed a whopping 4 generations before Fennekin would eventually debut. We recently got information on the origin stories of even more Pokemon thanks to the work of Did You Know Gaming, who have been working to have Japanese exclusive interviews with Game Freak staff translated into English. The next few stories come from these interviews, so a big shout out goes to DYKG for their work. A link to their own video where you can hear more about these interviews will be linked in the description below. With that said, these interviews effectively revealed the origins of the regional Pokemon of every region, such as the early game bugs and birds that we get with every new game. In an interview with Nintendo Dream magazine, members of Game Freak, including Junichi Masuda and Ken Sugimori, spoke on the development of Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire, and among the details mentioned was that the Gen 3 games were originally going to only feature brand new Pokémon, the same way that Black and White would only feature new Pokémon themselves, prior to the post-game anyway, in Generation 5. According to the interview, this is how Pokemon like Tailo and Wurmple came about, because with only new Pokemon featuring in the games originally, Game Freak felt it necessary to replicate some of the older Pokemon, like Pidgey and Caterpie, in order for their functions as early game Pokemon to be filled properly. According to the interview, Wurmple was made as a caterpillar in particular for this reason, in order to best showcase the concept of evolution to new players, just like Caterpie did in Gen 1. While these were the examples given in the interview, it can also be more or less assumed that this would have also been the reason why other regional Pokemon exist as well, such as the regional rodents or even the Pikachu clones of each region. These traditions weren't truly cemented until Generation 3 after all, so it's likely that every one of these Pokemon in the next 6 generations afterward have Ruby and Sapphire to thank for their existence, because they created multiple genres of Pokemon that weren't even really intended to be as such, since the original plan behind them was that of a reboot, rather than starting some kind of generational tradition like they ultimately ended up becoming a part of. As this video has already showed, Pokemon can come from all different kinds of inspiration, and that even includes their names. While you usually expect the Pokemon to be created before their names, evidently it can also happen the other way around, as in this same Nintendo Dream interview, it was revealed that Zigzagoon and Slakoth originated because their names were thought of first, and Game Freak thought the names were so good that they simply had to create a design to pair with them. If you've ever dabbled in creating your own Pokemon, or even just Pokemon names, you'll know that sometimes a name can just come to you out of complete happenstance, and it sounds like a similar situation could have occurred here. So it's very possible that thanks to nothing more than sheer dumb luck, that these two Pokemon, and subsequently their evolutions as well, even exist at all. Thanks to these interviews, it was even discovered how Blaziken and the rest of its family came to be as well. According to the interviews, Blaziken was actually the first Hoenn Pokemon ever created, seemingly when it looked like this, and was more so a combination of Blaziken and what would eventually become Latias than just Blaziken itself. The concepts behind the Blaziken line were also discussed here as well, revealing that they were based on painted chicks. Painted chicks involve baby chicks that are literally painted various colors and are seemingly sold as a cute novelty rather than an actual pet. And eventually, as animals tend to do, once these painted chicks grow up and don't look so cute anymore, they are often abandoned by their owners. It's this concept that Sugimori says he wanted to incorporate into these Pokemon's designs, by creating Torchic as a cute little baby chick, which eventually evolves into Blaziken, which was meant to be, quote, fierce and hard to look at, mimicking the real-life painted chicks that they are modeled after. It sounds like those who picked Torchic were almost meant to feel the desire to box their starter Pokemon when it became Blaziken, which admittedly is a strange concept to base a starter Pokemon on, considering how popular and important they are to the game. Possibly to Sugimori's surprise or dismay, however, this idea largely fell apart when Blaziken became almost universally beloved by the fanbase, and turned into one of the most popular starter Pokemon of all time. Meanwhile, one of the strangest origin stories of all time has to do with Marshadow. This is another one on the less definitive side of things, but the connections are too great to be discounted, and that's what makes it strange. As I mentioned in a recent video, a beta sprite of Arceus was recently discovered in a leak of Pokémon Diamond and Pearl's beta, which occurred a couple years ago. The sprite in question looks nothing like Arceus, but it does actually share a ton of similarity to Marshadow, to the point where the two are most likely connected in some way. The thing is though, Marshadow and Arceus have no actual connections themselves other than both being mythical Pokemon, so it's really puzzling as to what the connection between their development as Pokemon could be. Part of me wonders if the original concept of Arceus was actually closer to that of Marshadow, before it became god of the Pokemon world, and therefore their difference in appearance now could have to do with the change in direction for Arceus as a Pokemon. If true, that could mean that Marshadow was more or less planned for Gen 4 instead of Gen 7, but at the very least, it most likely has its roots in Gen 4 given the presence of this sprite, which is pretty crazy to think about. Another Pokemon with a funny set of circumstances behind its creation is Porygon. The mastermind behind Porygon was none other than series creator Satoshi Tajiri, and he relayed its origins in another interview that was also translated by Did You Know Gaming. In this interview, Tajiri said that he would often tell people that he was creating a game while Pokemon Red and Green were in development, but when he mentioned that it was for the Game Boy, most people would scoff and tell him that the Game Boy was old news, and he should be making a game with more polygons instead. So, in a cheeky response to his critics, Tajiri responded by putting more polygons in his game, but not the kind that make up 3D graphics. Instead, he made an actual Pokemon named Polygon, or Porygon as it's known when romanized into English, which, to be honest, is probably the most geniusly savage response to your haters that anyone could possibly ever have. Returning to our batch of Hoenn Pokemon, we next come to Groudon. And speaking of savage responses, Groudon's existence is thanks to some savagery as well. According to those aforementioned interviews, Game Freak wanted the Pokemon of Hoenn to be on the cooler side of things since fans had remarked that many of the Pokemon from Gold and Silver a generation earlier were on the more childish side of things. Sugimori in particular wanted to create more complex designs as well, something that Game Freak had to hold back on in the past in order for the Pokemon themselves to be easier to animate when it came to the anime, and cheaper to produce when it came to making toys and other merchandise. However, this time around, Sugimori decided to rebel against these restraints and in response said, and I quote, "Screw it." This resulted in some of the more complex looking designs that Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire have to offer, including Groudon, who owes the intricate pattern on its body to this particularly bold line of thinking. What do you guys think about all these origin stories though? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe for more content. You can also check out my Pokemon remixes on Spotify in order to further support the channel as well, which is greatly appreciated, and be sure to also check out Did You Know Gaming with the link below as well, and a big shout out to them once again for all their work. With that said, I'll be back very soon with another video, and until then, as always, thank you guys for watching this one, I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.